Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Ian Hopper, Director of Corporate Services at the Royal College of Pathologists in London, actually our first guest from overseas. So welcome, Ian.
Hey, pleasure to be here, chaps.
And appreciate you put on in your evening as well. So as Maz mentioned, it's our first guest from over the seas. So it's nice to have a fellow Brit on the call as well.
Pleasure.
All right, Ian, nice and easy. Tell us a little bit about your background in the change transformation space.
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. I've been sort of in the space, I guess, about 20 years. Started my career in civil service and Department for Education in the UK. And from that, I did all sorts of things, a bit of policy work, a bit of operational work, a bit of strategy work. But what I found is I just like making things happen. So I sort of gravitated towards the project side of things. And worked on some really interesting projects in my time in education, such as launching different types of school workforce role across the UK. So sort of broadening the school workforce away from teachers into a whole wider range of teaching assistants. Project work suited me. At that time, I realised that consulting firms have a huge amount of power and voice in government. I'd been commissioning companies in the Big Four, I think it's the Big Five for you guys, but commissioning companies to help us with bits of work, whether that was delivery or strategy or some evaluation. And thought, actually, if I made the jump into consulting, I could continue to work in public sector and have greater impact. And that was definitely the case. So I did my MBA, got a load of skills from that, and then made the switch into a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Which was fantastic, actually, to give me a really wide range of big, chunky transformation work. So let me just maybe pull out three examples. So a £50 million job to support a leading UK university, diversify its product base, attract more students, and change its back office. That was quite a meaty one. Did quite a bit of work for a government agency to deliver laptops into low-income households. So on the basis that, this is like 10, 15 years ago now, on the basis that kids do better when they can access resources online at home. Not every household had a laptop. So how do we get laptops and connectivity into low-income families? That was a nice, meaty, chunky delivery role. Let's think of a third. I did a whole host of work in private sector as well. So helped Royal Bank of Scotland, which is probably more known in the UK than the US, but spin off their card processing arm called WorldPay, which had been bought by venture capital. So had to basically create a standalone business so that WorldPay could stand alone, on a certain date. So did loads of types of chunky projects. And then I made the flip to doing it freelance, basically. So I sort of enjoy autonomy, enjoy responsibility. And thought I can get some interesting assignments through myself. And first gig I ended up doing for about 5 years, which was transformation director at the British Red Cross, doing a whole host of new product, innovation, cost cutting, efficiency, org design, org development stuff. For the British Red Cross globally and within the UK. So did a whole host of stuff, and I've done the transformation director role a number of times. What I do now is I enjoy doing operational stuff, so I'm sort of that COO equivalent, Director of Corporate Services for a fascinating member organisation, Royal College of Pathologists. So sorry, might have been a bit long there, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of the types of stuff I've done.
That's great, all good stuff. And so you spent 9 years PwC, and it was around that towards the tail end, I believe, when we first met. So back in 2017, obviously known each other a long time. I remember when you landed that first gig, and we kind of said, well, it'll be good project for 9-12 months, and then we'll see what else happens after that. And to your point, 5 years later, it was a real good run. Interim roles like that in the UK don't tend to go 5 years. So so before we dive into the content, there's a few things that stand out. But when did you know it was enough? In the consulting space, was there like a like an epiphany when it was like, you know what, like I've done it, I've seen it all, and this is my moment to go interim and take that gamble? Because you were pretty cushy, you were there 9 years, and getting the big projects. So when was that moment?
Indeed, and I think this sort of goes back to what people's skills and motivations are. So, and this is no disrespect to consulting firms, but obviously they're there to make money. They're very sales oriented, so it's all about winning the next assignment, doing the business development. Whereas my interest and skill set was always client side, delivering the projects for the client, and it was sort of that sort of, well, it wasn't a big epiphany, but yeah, it was definitely a career choice to, rather than force myself down the sales route to advance, to focus on continue to focus on strong delivery, supporting clients, help define and shape strategy, and then implement it, which I think I can always do a bit more directly, being freelance. And also you get to stay longer in places as well. So that Red Cross example there for 5 years, fantastic 5 years. And you build the relationships, you understand the business, you can add real value, I think, over that time period. And with consulting, sort of only really somewhere for 6 months or so.
I think sustainable value, I think that's the most important takeaway, right? Because you can make an impact in 6 months, but sustainable long-term impact, there's no better way to do that than working directly for an organization. Very good. I'm going to set the tone of the podcast real quick by saying, one of the things that really stands out, and knowing you for so long, is you said making it happen. I'm going to say get shit done, right? I know that's something you're passionate about. And look, historically, the stigma associated to nonprofits, universities, colleges, governments, public sector in general is that they're slow, they lack change, they're old school. You got civil servants, you got people who have been at the organization for 20, 30, 40 years. The resistance to change, they're kind of there for an easy payday, good benefits. But that's not always the case, and it's keen. I'm really keen to point that out, because some of the coolest projects that I've seen have been in that space, right? So, what's your thoughts and takeaways on that? Like, in terms of getting shit done, but also that does happen where you butt heads with people that are like, well, we've always done it this way for 30 years, right? And some of these people are lower paid compared to the commercial sector. So how do you go about that? Yeah,
I think it's sort of an interesting point, Kiro, not sort of over generalize, which I know we can all be slightly guilty of, because there is real good innovation happening in government. I think the UK government has done some fantastic stuff. It's got a good reputation, the digital arm. So there's quite a lot of, I think, cool ID stuff and shared data across government departments. So I think, let's sort of avoid over generalisation. But you're definitely onto something basically there. You do. It fundamentally, I think, comes back to culture always, and you'll probably hear me say that quite a bit on this chat today. Culture really drives your organisation. Now, whatever strategy you like, but there's the phrases in the culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is definitely true. So culturally, where I'm at the moment, some people, fantastic people have been there for 20 years. And so naturally people's desire to break out, try new things, might be there, but maybe they just lack awareness of what else happens elsewhere. So I think that's definitely something. What is going on elsewhere? The second thing I'll say, which is, again, it's a bit of a generalisation, I do think some public bodies, particularly government, can be over academic still. So, people like a debate, they like getting into strategy, they like talking in detail about options and choices and analyse. And I think there's the slight sort of academic bent you get in some organisations where you might write a paper, it's critiqued, and then you have to go and write another paper to answer the points, whereas a different culture might accept the spirit or intent behind the paper, as opposed to requiring a further detailed analysis. So I think there's sort of an academic style that you do get in public sector that slows things down.
Perfect. And I think also keen to avoid generalization. Probably some of the most passionate people about their careers are people that you find in the nonprofit space, right? And that's why they're there for 20 years, because they really care about the mission of the organization. Tell our listeners a little bit about your current role at the Royal College, because some of our listeners, obviously, we have a big US audience that might not be aware of what the Royal College of Pathologists do, and kind of what does that title, Director of Corporate Services, mean?
Yeah, cool. So look, good question. And I think I've been asked this a lot. What is it? The short answer is it's a member organisation. So it's not funded by government, not funded by consumers. It's funded by basically subscription fees. And this is quite common in the UK. There's quite a large number of member organisations. Every branch of medicine, so whether you're a surgeon, a GP, a physician, a psychiatrist, you will have a member organisation that will put on the exams you take to become qualified. So Royal College of Pathologists run exam. It's a big part of the business. And then once you are qualified, you can pay your £300 a year to become a fellow or member of the college. And from that, you get a whole host of career development opportunities, and a whole host of volunteering opportunities to help shape the profession. So a lot of pathologists spend a lot of time for us discussing the nature of pathology, understanding how it can benefit healthcare and society, and then from that increase the voice to lobby government. And in the case of pathologists, they're a bit unknown as to what they do. Basically, it's the science behind the test. So any test you have, a pathologist will be analysing the results for you. So member organisation funded by, not exclusively, but mainly by members. Pretty common in the UK. There's quite a few of these types of organisation around. But interesting one for me. First time in a member organisation, and it is smaller than I'm used to. About 80 people, £10 million business. And again, I think that's always a really interesting thing with transformation. The size of the organisation can have a real bearing on how change can be delivered.
Amazing. And we are called the CRM Success Show. So if you had to describe your perfect CRM project sponsor in 3 words, what would they be?
Okay, so I was thinking about this quite a lot. My answer would be a good sponsor is committed to change. And that means changing themselves, changing their teams, changing the organisation, changing the culture, changing the outcomes, changing the benefits. It's someone who's really committed to actually doing things differently and not maintaining the status quo.
Awesome.
Wow. There's a very strong temptation to ask you a whole bunch of questions about the British healthcare system, because it's so different here, and it's a very big hot topic at the moment because we just had a government shutdown, as you might have known.
Yeah.
It was all centered around cost of healthcare and how should be paid and all of that kind of stuff. Not to focus the podcast, obviously, So let's get back to CRM and specifically success or failure, let's say. So you mentioned a couple of things that really push not just CRM, but I think technology success and probably even strategy success.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned culture, good people, side of the organization. Um, what else would you think are like the keys to running a successful program at let's say kind of large nonprofit or even government agency?
Yeah, and I think so. I think the sort of the basics probably apply across all sectors and all countries. I would say, and I've got a diagram that I often talk through with people. So look, what leads to success? I'd start with: do you have a clear strategy? You know, which every organisation will say we do. But if you were to ask their people if they could just explain that strategy, I suspect most organisations or most people will fail to do that, basically. I'll give one example recently of a really clear strategy. This was for a global climate change non-government organisation I was with a couple of years ago. They did some fantastic work to reduce carbon emissions globally through a lot of UK programs, a little bit of overseas work as well. The board set them the challenge, which is the planet is not in a good position. You do great work, but can you have 10 times the impact? Can you, over the next 5 years, aim to have 10 times more savings with carbon dioxide from your work? And that just then became 10x, 10 times. So everybody in the organization, at every level could generally say, yeah, okay, our strategy is to 10x. You then got into the how, but as a strategy, it was really clear and it was a real galvanizing force for everything. So I'd always encourage any organization to think really hard about strategy and its understanding by its people. Is there a real strong call to action from your strategy? From that, then I think you need a number of component parts, and I'd always look whether these parts exist. Clearly, you would benefit from having, let's just pick tech, having a tech plan or roadmap that aligns to the strategy. And again, you often see a tech strategy, but it makes very little connection back to organizational strategy. Good reasons for that, with the amount of technical debt that exists. I think people forget how much work there is to just keep the plumbing going. But I think unless you really plan your tech, your digital roadmap against your organization strategy, you're missing a trick, basically. So I think there's a misalignment there at times. So I'd look for that. I'd then look for what used to be called a transformation roadmap. So how do we save money? How do we innovate? How do we do new products? I kind of starting to ban the word transformation because it's all about continuous change. So how are we just doing things differently? How are we innovating with products, with services for our customers to help us deliver our strategy? So I think, is there a clear change map that aligns to strategy is important. That change map needs to be owned by every business unit leader, not just the transformation director and chief exec. So I'd look for that ownership of a change and improvement roadmap from each business lead. You can then look at the other stuff you'd expect. So look at your resources. So have you got the right staffing structures? Can you afford that? Have you got the right estate, the right property, which is often forgotten? That's a big cost. Have you got the right suppliers supporting you? So yeah, strategy, but get your tech roadmap, your change roadmap, your resources, all pushing in the same direction. And I think, bringing that together in some form of sort of collective oversight can be really useful for organizations. So yeah, that to me are like really clear ingredients for success, or at least stuff that gives an organization a foundation to work from. And my sense is those four things aren't always clearly described, aligned, and all pushing in the same direction.
So you're saying you're starting with strategy, but I think you're really starting with vision, right? Vision, then strategy, right? So
Yeah.
vision, then you come up with a strategy of how we're going to accomplish that vision.
Yeah.
And then implement the technology that will meet and execute on that strategy. So let's focus a little bit on that, right? So great. So have a strategy. I have no idea how you have a strategy to, or what strategy there is to reduce carbon emissions, except, I don't know, fight with businesses or yell at them or beg them. And then there's the technology implement. Maybe you can tell us, I don't know what that is, or and then how you would implement the technology to help accomplish accomplish that goal. I mean, there is obviously a technology side of it, is right, producing tech that in and of itself uses or emits less emissions, I suppose. Yeah. So right. So how do we get from the strategy to tech, right?
Yeah, it is. So yeah, good question. And this is, I think, where stuff often breaks down, basically, because tech isn't properly enabling strategy. That example I gave of that climate NGO who called WRAP, WRAP, who I should give a shout out to because they do fantastic work. That's probably not the best example because their growth came through business development and securing funding to run their programs in different countries, basically. So tech wasn't so much of an issue there. It was more about operational ability and funding to secure that. Where I am now at Royal College of Pathologists is, I think, is a bit more typical in that there's not a clear IT plan, basically. So I'm, working with the head of IT who reports into me. Let's be really clear, actually, about the volume of technical debt remedial work there is to do, because until we clear a lot of that, actually, it's pointless to start talking about, right, okay, how do we properly enhance and use AI to improve business processes, for example. You can have a bit of that, but I think at least being clear on the volume of work there is to do to keep the lights running and work out where risk lies is a really important foundation point. So I think, to me, Dave, it's just about putting down on paper all the stuff that needs doing, all the stuff that the tech team are aspiring to do, and then working down from the vision and mission to try and do some alignment then from the top down into those plans, basically. Because it may be we can accelerate AI work, but with that comes, we need to invest heavily in, accelerating some of the remedial technical debt work. But these are the conversations that you need to get into at, at C-suite and board level.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I guess where I'm struggling with, again, is when you're talking about getting from strategy to tech, and keep in mind my background is heavily, finance or hard business where they're looking, right? So you're thinking, okay, I need to develop more sales. How am I going to manage my customer service, my customer relations? I need to track my activities, track my opportunities, right? That's what you typically think of.
Yeah.
What is my go-to-market strategy, and then what's the technology needed to support that?
Yeah.
When I'm thinking nonprofits, I'm often thinking in terms of fundraising, events, and then potentially operations, right? If I'm distributing money, how do I identify people, process applications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What did that look like at a government scale, though? Right? Because it's a very different goal.
It is, and I think this is where organisations struggle. It is to articulate what actually their operation is. So you did that really well there, Dave, for the examples that you're drawing upon. But it does get quite complex when you get into government, particularly any national government, because there's a whole variety of what I would call products and services. But again, that language isn't common in government. It's much more about, actually we have duty of care to do certain things under law or whatever. So yeah, I think getting really into getting people to put down on paper what is the operational thing they do for what person in what audience in what way, to me, is a really good starting point to actually unpick what any organisation is trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to do at Royal College of Pathologists. So, okay, with exams, who actually is interacting with us at what points, in what way, because there's different parts of the training journey. Workforce and professional development, at what point do people engage with us, in what channels, through what services, do we align when they pay their subscription fee to us each year with any particular outputs and deliverables to them, so they instantly see product that they're getting as a result of their fee. So to me, it is, I do try and apply that language that you see in the private sector of audience, product, service into government, but it's not typical. It's not a typical way of thinking, but I think it can add real value.
Awesome. So hopping back to, let's say, leadership, sponsorship of a project, right? So you have someone comes up with a vision. It'll be interesting how that happens in a member organization. Members vote, or they elect someone, a board, I guess, right? They elect a board.
Yeah.
And then what someone on that board would act, they sponsor or decide on a project representing the members. So what did that look like, and what would make for an exceptional good sponsor at that level?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and let's just sort of use the member organisation example again. So you're right, there is as well as the chief exec, there is an equivalent of a chair called the president, who is elected. So there's essentially an elected chair equivalent who has a 3-year course of office, who is there to represent pathology, to the chief exec and the management team. So that person can really shape direction, and our president's pushing very hard on us to make sure we're very clear about how the work the college does benefits pathology and how pathology benefits society, to be much more visible about that, so we have a greater voice. That then takes you into how do you sponsor a change project, and I'll just get straight into the fact now. We've got a dynamics project underway. It was started before I joined, so I joined 6 months ago. The project's been around for a couple of years or so, and it's very, very interesting when you look at this project, because everyone talks about, oh, this will change how this team processes things. This will help this team move off one database to another database. It will help this team, manage communications, with various stakeholder groups. The whole language is internally focused about staff and how Dynamics supports them. Whereas actually, I'm doing a mindset shift now across the project team and the org. The whole reason, or the benefits of putting this investment in will be to members. So, Dave, Kiro, you're pathologists, you're paying your fees to us. You can now go online to the web portal and look at and update and amend your own subscription payment timeline. You can instantly access your exam results. You can interact with the college if you're a volunteer and see all the committee papers that are relevant to you in one place. So we need to shift it into being a project that puts the members, the external beneficiary, at the heart. And that's a really sort of significant change. And what I fundamentally say that helps me in this situation is, it ain't an IT project, this. This ain't IT's thing. We are your delivery partner to help put this thing in. But actually, Kiro, you run the exams team. Are you really behind this system? And are you sort of lobbying, leading and espousing change within the exams team so that we get the benefit of exams into you? Dave, you run the workforce team, you do all the workforce modelling. Are you really behind what we're trying to do with this CRM project? So we've got to sort of shift it away from this type of CRM thing being seen as something just for IT to put in, which I think happens so often, into the leadership of the whole organisation and leadership at all levels saying, great, this might be a bit of pain now to do business processes, to do UAT, to do whatever. But at the end of it, we're going to get a tool that helps us serve our customers better. That's sort of the fundamental shift we need to make. So yeah, that's I think at the heart of many of these things in public sector and probably private as well. Move away from seeing CRM as an IT thing.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Although I think currently the trend is move it to IT, away from the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to continue for a while. So one more question on this. So you said you came 2 years in, 6 months ago. Elections are every 3 years.
Yeah.
Did that throw like a wrench? Like, I'm assuming you probably already had an election within the middle of the project, and now your leadership team changes, and I assume
Yeah.
a change in vision, particularly if the members weren't happy with leadership,
Yeah.
and they're voting for change. And these projects can sometimes be multi-year projects. Did that play a factor in your decision making or your processes?
Yeah, and I think it must is the short answer, because ultimately, this CRM project's being funded in large part by member subscription fees. So it has to sort of show benefit. I think a really good way to do that is to I'm being very transparent about cost, basically, to do proper whole life full costing of every element of this project to enable leaders to make choice points, basically. And that's quite interesting, because you could shoot for perfection, I think, with CRM systems. If you ask everyone for their requirements, everyone wants it to do all this stuff, which you can do, but ultimately that can start to get quite expensive. So I think there's something about being transparent about cost to help leaders, decision makers, make choice points about how much time and effort to put into CRM systems.
I find it personally really ironic hearing that a lot of the focus was on, as you said, the staff benefits of moving to CRM, when the clue's kind of in the name, customer relationship management, right? So, but you're right. You're like, a lot of it is how can we save time? How can we increase visibility on X, right? And the link between that and the customer is often an oversight, when in reality it should be first. So sometimes just calling it as it is, the actual CRM full name, maybe might just remind a couple of people what the point of a CRM actually is and who it's supposed to serve, right? Cool. So you're in a really unique position to offer opinions on the differences between public and private, UK and European and US projects. You've had exposure, visibility. You've led these different initiatives and programs of work throughout your career. So just wanted to kind of ask you some of your observations between different motivations and behaviors and expectations around a CRM and general project delivery, change management, etc., that you've witnessed over the years between the different worlds, different organizations. Tell us a little bit about, maybe some stories and just general opinions that you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, cool. No, this is I think an interesting point. And I have worked on global projects when I was at PwC, across Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific. And they're quite interesting, because you get a real sense of different working styles across different continents. I've sort of also done quite a lot of work in outside of public sector, so I've worked in investment banking, retail, etc. So, and I'm going to try and stay away from generalizations on this podcast. I know, Dave, you've already sort of been a bit of a chat before, and you were a bit like raised an eyebrow at something, that I was observing. And that was possibly that my sense was that in the US, there's a lot of focus on reporting, basically, and people being very transparent about what's happening. Does that mean the culture, though, is about reporting over doing? Possibly not, basically. So I'm going to avoid generalizations. What I will say is I do think there's some very different ways in which projects are run, no matter where, no matter for what sector. And I do think this all boils down to culture, leadership styles, and just the organisation, basically. Some organisations are very comfortable with projects just rolling their sleeves up and getting stuck in, basically. And that can happen quite a lot, particularly in the early days of projects, where people get quite excited by them. But then you can get, put your business case in, get a couple of million quid approved, build up the project team, and the culture that I've sort of put in is, great, let's now just smash this thing through, talk to the business, get cracking and get stuff delivering. However, if you just go down that route, when things go a bit wobbly, and maybe you go over budget or you're projecting to go over budget or over time, stakeholders, so the board could get a bit funny with, why weren't we notified of, these risks earlier on? However, I still think there's some real benefits in a culture of project teams just getting stuck in and working at pace to create energy and enthusiasm in a business. On the converse, though, some organisations, particularly I think where there's large investments, get very fixated on the whole reporting side, and they like the project. They like project teams, transformation leaders to just do sort of what I call air traffic control reporting, use loads of dashboards, play back what's happening to then help other people decide how to steer and intervene. That can create an awful, large burden for reporting, to get your budget information, project information, all together, intelligible, understood. And I think too much focus on just the dashboards, again, can sort of slow down the delivery piece. So there's two different, I think, ways of going there. Free rein, fill your boots, roll your sleeves up, get stuck in, versus the cautious, right, how's it all going at every stage? Let's have multiple governance groups. Intuitively, neither extreme is going to be a good thing, is it, basically? I think the art is just reading where you are on that spectrum, particularly if you're a transformation leader or an IT director, and then just working out how to play it at various points in the project, basically. That's definitely something I've learned.
Have you found a difference between those two sides of the coin, be it public sector versus commercial, or does it just vary on, they're kind of mutually exclusive, they're not exclusive, and it depends?
Yeah, again, you could sort of, potentially, hypothesize that private sector's a bit more, gung-ho, sleeves rolled up, get all stuck in. Public sector's a bit more risk-averse and doing all the reporting. I don't think that's true, actually. From my time in government, you can get, big money to do big things, but with that comes political pressure. So, a bit like your point, Dave, earlier, you are bound by election cycles in public sector. Ministers will have a pet project and they want it to happen, which can create real sort of tension and challenge about smashing a project through. So I don't think it's quite as clear cut as private sector is fast, public sector slow. I'd also say my experience of private sector can be, because projects, when they go wrong, those failings aren't visible. I think that can create a culture of poor practice in private sector. Whereas if a public sector project goes badly, it makes the newspapers, it gets reported on. There's lots of analysis. It's very visible when public stuff overruns. Who knows how many private sector projects don't deliver what they should do on time. But it's just not visible in the way that it is. It's certainly not as clear cut as that binary, one side doing one thing, one side having to learn from the other. It all comes back to culture, fundamentally.
It's the accountability piece as well, isn't it? And I think you nailed it, where it's the public's money versus a company's money. I mean, look, if a big Fortune 500 company that's privately funded, wants to spend their own 50 mil on a project and it tanks, who cares? It's not our money.
Yeah.
So it's that accountability piece, right? At the end of the day. So let's think about a global project and the different cultures that you've got to navigate as part of that. Maybe you've got global teams, different cultures, different, beliefs, religions, whatever, right? Yeah. How does that impact when it comes to expectations and setting a standard around governance, holding certain, I don't want to say work streams, maybe countries accountable from a sponsorship perspective, delivery of projects? How does the different cultures, be it just general, their beliefs in life and their attitude towards working and live to work versus work to live kind of mindset, right?
Yeah. No, again, I think that's a really interesting point, and I've sort of really observed this doing global work at PwC. Definitely, I've found something about some cultures being very keen to be very transparent in what they're doing, to just make it very clear what they're up to, and so that can lead to endless emails from maybe one team, across the global team, basically. Whereas other teams might, be much more comfortable, just logging off at the end of the day and then just not worrying about anything until they log back on, the next morning. It's definitely, there are issues and tensions. The way I would look at this is building up a culture of one team is something that is hugely important and beneficial to any global projects team, because I don't think that often is invested in enough. Many people on project teams, particularly those people who've been seconded into it from a business unit, are still loyal to that business unit, that territory, or whatever. So getting into, right, what are our ways of working going to be on this project? Can be a really good just starting exercise. Yeah, and that might get you into, well, actually, across the team, we don't want to be CC'd into stuff. We trust you all to get on and just let us know if something's going badly. So let's sort of move away from a CC type culture. It can also get you into, how do we actually build trust across a team? And if you are working globally, different time zones, not meeting face to face, that can be quite hard to do. So actually, how do you build trust with your team, show vulnerability, show intent, show sincerity to encourage and foster that type of approach across a team, I think can solve all sorts of problems, because you don't want different parts of your project team bickering, which is again what happens quite a lot still. So even like in this sort of a much smaller UK project at the moment, pathologists, I'm spending a lot of time talking about trust and ways of working across the team, because it does encompass suppliers, college people who are been there a while, new college people, the IT team, people seconded in from the business. We are all ultimately one team, and let's act and operate as such. And I think, again, if you haven't got that, if you don't feel that you're one team and you're not sensing you're one team, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, and I think as well, like especially even just differences between Brits and Americans, and how you communicate to different project teams as well can be an interesting observation in itself, right? I think in the UK it's a lot more please and thanks, and being aware of when you may be sending a message, where in the US it's a lot more just direct to the point. No hi, how are you? Just like, hey, what's the status update? And I found myself, I've been in obviously the US now for 7 years. I sometimes when I talk to the UK, I have to kind of be a bit more aware, because we are very direct in the US. Even I'm too direct sometimes for my clients in the US, but when you're switching back to different cultures and different teams and how they respond, you have to kind of be cognitive and know that, right? So, okay, good. Do you think?
Anecdotally on that, just anecdotally, I think also the younger generation here in the US is a lot more susceptible, and you got to use a smaller tone. I'm not going to give the specifics, but I was once had to go sit down and talk to HR because I was too hard on my
Oh,
junior
yeah.
employees.
Doesn't surprise me.
Oh. And it's, I mean, we're smiling at this, but it's a really interesting point as well. You know, in delivery teams, you get all sorts of different ages as well, don't you? Different generations, and actually, people's expectations are different. You know, in Gen Z than they are in millennials and Gen X. It's really, you know, it's really interesting. You know, you've got to be very cognizant of that.
And I think as well, you add in an aging workforce into the mix as well, right? You know, people that might have in IT retired at 50, 55 and now working to 60, 65. You've got another generation of, you know, people that are working as well. You've got potentially people that are, you know, the latter end of their career in their 60s and people in their 20s, you know, at the start of their career, very different philosophies who've only known working in the pandemic era where it's remote. It's a lot more like of a mentality where we work to live versus live to work, right? I say we, I'm not putting myself in that category, but it's a different mindset, and that could be like alien to somebody towards the tail end of their career, right? So I never even thought about necessarily that dynamic, but you throw that into the different culture dynamic as well, and you've just got this whole big piece of potential issues to work around.
So how would you work around that then, chaps?
No, this man's a workaholic. Don't let him fool you. He is.
Okay.
He is.
I call
He
a
can't even get him on
friend.
the phone on a Sunday. He's like, I'm busy.
A couple of calls scheduled today, so case in point. I mean, look, you know, it's. I think it comes down to people's motivations, right? And I think that's just leadership in general. Good leaders know what motivates their workforce.
Yeah.
And for some, it's going to be title and recognition. For some, it's going to be pay. For some, it's going to be more time off with their family, right? And I think that's the one-on-one people management. I think the more you know your employee, your team, the better you're able to channel the different individuals and those motivation factors. Probably look at your team, you can see that.
And let's just pause on that. Sorry, Kiro. So let's just pause on that. Because yeah, this is at the heart of it as well, I think. And this goes back to me saying, you know, this type of CRM thing, it ain't an IT project, it's a business project. And I can see why, you know, IT get past this stuff because the business doesn't have the capacity or capability, but they do still need to own it. Because let's, you know, use an example here. The way in which the membership team and the finance team at Pathologists will be interacting with members about payments, direct debits, etc., is fundamentally going to change under CRM. That may lead to, well, what are people's jobs are naturally going to change as a result of that. And actually, you know, are people worried about their jobs? Are people worried about a tech system falling over and are therefore naturally very curious, risk averse, and looking at and scrutinizing the project in a huge amount of detail? Yes, but whilst my project team can reach out, support, listen to that team, fundamentally the director who looks after that business unit has to get stuck into those conversations themselves, has to get into, right, how do we all feel about the project? Do we feel our jobs are threatened? You know, what more can we do when we have this free time? You know, what would help you get this over the line? You know, would it be a case of if I could give you a bit of a bonus at the end of this, would that help keep you motivated, or are you looking for something else? No transformation leader, no project team can know all that stuff about the people in the business units who are impacted and involved in the project. It has to be the business unit leaders having that type of conversation. And that's why I always push on this point. You've got to get that ownership into the business so that they're embracing this and leaders are taking accountability for success.
Couldn't agree more. Perfectly said. We talked a little bit about pace of projects. So I want to ask you one question before we move on from this topic. Do you think the emphasis on visibility and risk management leads to better project outcomes or slower project outcomes? Gives you 60 seconds on that.
Okay, right. I'm going to say I do think it depends, basically. I think that the communication
You make a good politician, Ian, if you're going to say depends.
It depends.
Give us a yes or no. Give us a yes or no.
I don't think I can do that. Look, what would I say? I think comms is at the heart of this, basically. You've got to get your comms right, basically. If you're doing a CR implementation, you've got to work out a way to keep the great and the good above you, aware, comfortable, and feeling engaged, and that will vary. So there may be times when it's worth going heavy on reporting, governance, scrutiny, visibility. But at the same time, if you want to get it over the line, you have to flex that, because you can't just do reporting, governance, visibility endlessly, for a year and a half, 2 years, because you can, but your PMO is going to sort of get quite burnt out. So it is a depends. I think it is a balance. You've got to find that sweet spot to keep people happy without overburdening anybody. Fundamental question to ask is what I'm reporting on adding any value to anybody? That's what you need to ask yourself.
Good. Thanks, Ian.
So, have you ever read the book Moral Mazes? Who's the author?
No.
The author was Robert Jackal. It's one of the greatest books on management. For me, at least, because it really, really goes into the psychology of management. Not necessarily how to be a good manager. It just goes into everything that's wrong and why. The other one is the Peter Principle, which I'm sure you've heard of. So Robert, I think he interviewed a bunch of managers at chemical factories back in like the 80s, and they were managing these factories, and their promotion was based on how well their factory ran, and then they would get promoted to a division or move to a larger factory or whatever. And he said that the trend was don't maintain your machines, your budget goes down, you make a boatload of money in your thing, you get promoted out, and then it's the next guy's problems when they start failing, right? And I feel like in government, at least here in the U.S., I think it's a rampant problem, and it's just a consequence of term limits, potentially, or right? You set for the time, and you constantly see laws passed that take effect after they leave office. Absurd. Like, taxes will go up the minute I leave. That just to pay for the stuff we're doing today. Do you see that kind of stuff when you're dealing with election held positions or nonprofits where they have, and it could tie back to this reporting question, right? Because you're trying to make your reports look good as opposed to really running a quality organization. You're rigging the KPIs, basically.
You are, and this gets you into the machinery of government, and what's the check and balance to wild swings in direction comes through in the UK. That's the point of having an independent civil service. So they're not politically appointed. They are professionals who can properly analyse, advise, and guide politicians to help the politician shape their thinking into a manageable policy or project. So that's sort of the theory in the UK as to why the civil service is independent, because it has that professionalism and the skill set to shape, and support, obviously, the politician's direction to make it happen. But I do think even things are ever more politicized, and you can see definitely in the UK, and you see this in the US, don't you? Programs being funded or cut just at political will, essentially.
I did want to ask shortly about your time at the Red Cross. If I remember correctly, I think you said you inherited some kind of a mess, and then you came up with a strategy to kind of straighten things out and return that ship. Want to tell us a little bit about that? What exactly you inherited and what you did to fix it?
Yeah, so The inherited thing is a little bit more where I'm currently at, actually, particularly on this CRM project. The way it's being constructed, is not how I would have set it up, and that's because my predecessor didn't have hadn't done a CRM project, hadn't led a CRM project before. So consequently, the contract we have with the systems integrator isn't the contract that I would have written. The relationship we have with the systems integrator isn't quite right. The project team was underinvested in. So this is what I've been going through in my time at Pathologists, which is firmly looking at, right, actually, we've got this ship that's been started. What are our choice points at this point to get it over the line? And actually, I've done all the thinking. Do we just abandon ship and start again? And we've sort of gone through an informed decision to not do that for various reasons. So fundamentally, I think the learning here is, in any organisation, make sure that when you scope out something big, particularly tech related, particularly CRM related, make sure it's all properly thought through and understood with good business engagement. There was a similar theme I saw at the Red Cross, which was a great organisation. My job there was as much about just helping steer them towards sustainability through sustainable change projects and building up portfolios and then programs of change to deliver that. But there they had a difficult CRM project as well. So even with good scrutiny from external advisors, from the CIO, from me as transformation director, etc., fundamentally their CRM project overran in terms of time and money. And again, it's sort of from talking to people about that, it goes back to a lack of clear business ownership, essentially. And that's not ownership of the requirements, it's not ownership of the solution, it's fundamentally ownership of finding solutions that will help the organisation change and making it clear that people's jobs will change through technology. It's the classic thing, Dave. Don't change your process, or change your processes to fit an out-the-box system. Don't do the endless bespoking of the system to fit your processes. And I see that time and time again. To me, that's a number one learning that still isn't properly understood and adhered to. And I've seen that time and time again.
How do you like, if someone's working at the Red Cross, I assume it's because they want to save lives, not because they don't want to deal with software. How do you get them to switch that focus, particularly at that level where you need, right? Because either the heads of the business, if you want to call it a business, right, and they're running operations, or they're literally trying to save lives. How do you get them to switch to focus on some CRM system?
Yeah, that's good question. This is where I think lots of organisations struggle, because not every business leader is going to be well versed in operations, strategy, delivery, and change and tech. Rare is the person who can do all of that. What I've seen work, this happened once I left the Red Cross and there was a change of chief exec. It really, I think, is up to the chief exec to look the business unit leader in the eye and explain to them what they want and what the chief exec is asking for. So for a long time at Red Cross, we were working with retail and getting retail to think about, okay, maybe close some of your unprofitable stores, maybe invest a bit more in e-commerce. Let's look at our online goods platform, yada, yada, yada. And we did lots of incremental bits to try and do bits and pieces of that, but it was all going a bit slow. New chief exec came in, got the head of retail in, got the fundraising exec director in, looked them in the eye and said, right, in 6 months' time, I want e-commerce to have trebled in value. And therefore, the problem is becoming owned by the business leader. So it was the retail and fundraising director who then had a proper commission from the chief exec to make something happen. What they can then do is augment their skill set, and that's where a change scheme can come in to then partner with that business unit to bring that change, that innovation, that tech way of thinking. But fundamentally, Dave, because you won't get, because you don't get leaders who can do all this stuff, I do think it really is the responsibility of the chief exec to set a very clear requirement and expectation on the relevant business leaders, because that has, if it doesn't come from the chief exec, it can't come from the transformation director, because it ain't gonna land.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in the private sector. It's almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
I think. One last question on this, more focus on nonprofits. Right, nonprofits generally have a charter, right? Red Cross, let's say, save lives. Any concern of like every dollar I'm spending on systems is a dollar I'm not putting towards our core charter, and budgetary constraints? Over here in the US, I'm sure it's in Britain too, is people look at the, like, they're required legally to report how much of the donations they collect are actually spent on the core mission versus operations. And if people see that percentage is skewed, that ratio is skewed, they just will stop donating. Because, like, what am I donating for? I'm just paying salaries, not right. Yeah. So how did that play a role?
Yeah, it does. I think this goes back to culture as well, actually, which I think really does drive project success and efficiency. So let's sort of go back to government. And in government, you hear civil servants talk about, this is taxpayers' money. So fantastic, we've been given £15 million from the Treasury to deliver whatever, but it's taxpayers' money. So we've got to make sure we spend it properly, and let's go through the right process to make sure we procure the right partner to help us with this, value for money at the heart of it. All big projects in the UK in government gets pretty much scrutinised by a major projects authority. So the real strong framework for success. There's a bit of cost to that infrastructure, but actually you get a good output in that many things actually deliver pretty well in government. What disappoints me a little bit is in the charity sector and the membership sector, you don't hear many people talk about, well, this is donors' money or this is members' money. It just sort of comes in year on without that political cycle you get in government. And I think people get a bit complacent. And that does frustrate me, Dave. And absolutely. So while charities do report on how much money is going to the front line, the back office costs in charities are high, quite rightly. But I do think there's an efficiency thing that really would help get better value for money for donors and members. And obviously tech and AI can really support that stuff. So I think, a smart organisation will leverage tech, leverage AI to cut those back office costs, get efficiencies from the back office to enable better, smoother frontline delivery.
So many follow-up questions I want to ask, but I'm just conscious of time. I think, some of the best people that have made the biggest impact in the nonprofit space for me have been individuals that have come outside of the sector. They've worked for companies that are on the stock market. You've got shareholders to answer to. We talk about those efficiencies. How can we be more efficient with spend, because it is donors' money, right? Sometimes you need to bring people in who are a bit more obsessed with the dollar value on a P&L, right? So load of questions I want to ask there, but the one question I'm curious about, as a transformation leader, part of your success will be judged on the turnaround of this dynamics project, right, in the current role. Do you see a world, because I run into this issue more, right, and I'm trying to phrase it the right way. Do you see a world where sometimes these projects are already doomed to fail because of the statement of work that's been written and the system integrator that's been selected? And do you see a world where, as a person interviewing for that role, like, is it acceptable to say, look, I need to, before I give you a decision on taking this job, I need to see the statement of work that you've agreed to, and this implementation partner's agreed to, and almost like just do that extra level of due diligence rather than kind of walk into it and go, okay, I'm screwed kind of thing. Like, is it acceptable to ask somebody that in an interview, you know, and would you do it next time, having known kind of what you've unraveled so far?
I think that this is a really good
quick story before you answer. I'm sorry. Because this actually happened to me. I took a consulting job to run a fairly large firm's, right, just publicly traded firm's CRM implementation as a project manager. And I asked the question, how's the project going? Like, no, we didn't even start yet. We're going to start next month. So we need you to start like right away because the project is about to start.
Yeah.
I get there and they're literally 2 months into the project and 6 weeks behind schedule. Right, 2 months in and 6 weeks behind schedule and over budget. They didn't do anything. And I went to my boss. I'm like what the heck? You told me you didn't start yet, and everything's fine. I'm like, and he tells me verbatim, if I told you the truth, you wouldn't have taken the job. That's what he told me.
Oh man.
Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, but how did you feel about that, Dave?
Nothing. What am I going to do? I turned it around. It took a few weeks.
Okay.
Luckily, we were early enough, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's.
But how much transparency, I guess, do you think it's okay to ask? That's the question, right?
Well, look, and this is where it gets into the whole world of interviews, doesn't it? And the best interview is a conversation, isn't it? Essentially, where both sides are having a conversation about what matters, getting into this type of convo. Now, had I spotted that this was quite, not doomed to failure, but not set up in the right way? No, but they didn't know themselves at that moment in time. It was only by me coming in and unpicking it. But look, I'm quite good at, I feel I can protect myself, protect the team. All we can do is just play back, like, where are we at today? What choice points do we have going forward from here? And that does mean I will want to unpick some of the legacy stuff here once we get through this first release. So getting into, ultimately, what relationship do we want with the systems integrator once we've gone live, and for future releases, is at the heart of my thinking, because things have to change, basically. So yeah, it's a good question. I'm not losing sleep because I've inherited a project. My job's to get it over the line and get a quality product over there. It's going to cost more. It's going to take longer. But what I can bring is a level of experience that means when I do replan and rebudget, I'm pretty comfortable we're going to hit those because I just know enough, having done this before, basically. So yeah, I think bringing professional expertise in, as that check and balance, just to do the validation, can be really helpful. But look, bringing in people who've got the right experience is clearly, what any sort of anybody should do when they're hiring for their team.
Amazing. Good stuff. Ian, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. Really appreciate your time.
No, it's been great. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff, and we could probably have carried on for another hour, couldn't we, I suspect?
We'll do a round 2, I reckon, in the future. To our listeners, please do not forget to follow the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring our guests, such as Ian from over the pond. And again, once again, Ian, for your time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Cheers.